Let's jump right into this explainer. Today we're exploring a psychological landscape that is literally right on the surface of our skin. Have you ever noticed how, in a world where it feels like absolutely everyone is getting inked, there's a group of people who just categorically refuse to get a tattoo? We're going to uncover the deep psychological patterns behind that refusal. And just to clear the air right away, this isn't about judging anyone with tattoos. Tattoos are an incredible, beautiful form of expression. Instead, we're shining a spotlight on the minds of those who choose to keep their skin totally bare. Because honestly, that choice, it reveals a ton about how they process time, identity, and the whole world around them.
Okay, let's dive into this core mystery. Why choose bare skin? It's a genuine puzzle when you first think about it. I mean, these folks don't necessarily hate art. They're not sitting around judging their friends who are covered in amazing ink. But despite living in a culture that totally celebrates this kind of self-expression, they just know one absolute truth about themselves. They never, ever want something permanent on their skin. So why is that? What's the mental barrier stopping them from jumping in on something so incredibly common?
Look, on one hand, we've got this widespread popularity and profound love for tattoos. People use them to commemorate loved ones, reclaim their bodies, or, let's be real, just because they look incredibly cool. But on the flip side, we have this firm, unwavering refusal. And psychology tells us this stark contrast doesn't come from some superficial place. It's actually rooted in a really deep internal psychological framework. It isn't just a passing preference, it's a reflection of core personality traits. So to really wrap our heads around this, we need to break down a few fundamental relationships these individuals have with their own lives. Which brings us to our first major theme, the fluid future self and how these individuals relate to time. To really understand the refusal of permanent ink, we first have to look at how these minds view their own personal evolution, their intense need for control, and a fascinating mechanism known as regret sensitivity. For someone who refuses tattoos, identity is highly, highly fluid. Think about your own hairstyle, or maybe your music taste from 10 years ago. Pretty different, right? Well, they don't view themselves as a finished product. The person they were in the past is vastly different from who they are right now, and their present self is inevitably going to give way to a completely new future self. So for them, a permanent mark just feels like restricting or locking in a version of themselves that might totally vanish in 5, 10, or 20 years. In fact, a lot of people who skip the ink ask themselves one really profound question. What if I become a different person later? Now, hearing that, you might just think, oh, they're just indecisive, they can't pick a design. But actually, scratch that. It's not indecision at all. It's a deep philosophical stance on personal evolution. They fully recognize that their beliefs, their tastes, their values, they're all going to shift over time. And they absolutely do not want a permanent, unchangeable symbol representing a past era of their life that they've completely outgrown. And that brings us to the psychology of irreversible choices. People who highly value control desperately want the option to change, adjust, or undo their decisions. Think of it kind of like being paralyzed by committing to a specific phone case, but multiplied by 1,000. A tattoo is permanent, and to this specific psychological profile, permanence literally equates to a loss of flexibility. It takes away the option to change your mind forever. For a mind that constantly craves control and adaptability, committing to an irreversible choice on their own physical body creates this deep, lingering sense of discomfort. So, the crucial point here is how this loss of flexibility interacts with something called regret sensitivity. Psychology shows us that some minds actually replay bad decisions way more intensely than others. These folks are highly sensitive to regret. They're long-term thinkers. Before they make any choice, they actively imagine potential future disappointment. Even if they absolutely love a design today, the mere possibility of future regret feels overwhelmingly stronger to them than their excitement in the present moment. The risk simply outweighs the reward. I mean, have you ever obsessed over some tiny, embarrassing mistake you made like 5 years ago? Imagine applying that exact level of caution to permanently altering your actual skin. Now, let's shift our focus to the physical vessel itself. Section 2, preservation and internal meaning, and a relationship with the body. For this group, the body feels like something to maintain, not modify. This is a massive core association for them. While they might be perfectly happy swapping out their wardrobe, getting a wild new haircut, or completely changing up their daily routines, marking the physical body permanently, that feels fundamentally different. To them, it feels psychologically intrusive. It creates this deeply unsettling feeling that something in its natural original state has been altered forever. The baseline has been disrupted, And their instinct is firmly pointed towards preservation. Now, what's really fascinating about this contrast is the difference between external display and internal processing. Tattoos are so often used to mark emotional moments, right? Pain, love, core beliefs, major life milestones. But individuals who refuse tattoos tend to process meaning inwardly. They just don't feel this need to place every profound emotional experience on the outside for the rest of the world to see. While others use their skin as this beautiful canvas to express their most important stories, this psychological profile actually prefers their most significant memories and beliefs to remain entirely private and unseen. It's essentially a completely internal archiving system. And that leads us to our final major theme, Section 3, Resisting the Ink Trend and their relationship with society.
Let's see how this builds. Because how does a highly internal, fluid-minded, control-oriented person react when placed in a culture where tattoos are becoming the absolute norm? Well, it creates a fascinating cycle of resistance. Step 1. Tattoos naturally become tied to trends, social identity, and just fitting in. Step 2. As a direct result, the practice becomes increasingly common. But step 3 is where it gets really interesting. For people who refuse tattoos, this actually triggers a massive instinctive pushback. They possess a psychological profile that heavily resists doing things just because everyone else is doing them. The more common tattoos become, the less interested they feel. Ultimately, keeping their skin bare reflects a deep, powerful need to make their decisions completely independently of the crowd.
Which brings us to our conclusion, beyond the skin. We've seen today that the refusal to get a tattoo is rarely just a simple aesthetic preference. It's actually this complex, hidden psychological web of needing control, viewing identity as beautifully fluid, protecting against future regret, and preserving independent thought. By breaking down the concepts in this explainer, we can see that understanding these seemingly simple choices genuinely helps us view the people around us in a completely different, much more empathetic light. So, I want to leave you with this provocative question. What do your small, everyday choices reveal about your mind? Whether it's the ink you choose to wear proudly or the bare skin you consciously choose to keep, our outward physical choices are always echoing our deepest internal psychology. Keep questioning the everyday behaviors around you because there is always a fascinating psychological pattern hiding just beneath the surface. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and keep learning.